Welcome to Menopause the Positive Way, the podcast that inclusively supports women plus moving through their menopause journey with greater ease, control, and an empowered mindset. You can subscribe to this series wherever you get your podcasts. Brought to you by Positive Health, making life easier and helping you make a change for the better. Hello, and thank you for joining us here on Menopause the Positive Way podcast. My name is Courtney Pesic, and I am your host. Today we are speaking with Dr. Zeke Medina. Dr. Zeke Medina is a doctor of pharmacy and certified adult sleep consultant who helps people uncover the root causes of their sleep struggles. After personally experiencing years of insomnia, he became passionate about helping others improve their sleep without depending on medications. He works with individuals one-on-one in group settings and also created self-guided online sleep courses for those who prefer to learn at their own pace. Dr. Medina now teaches on platforms like Thera Optimal Health and runs his own coaching practice where he blends functional and integrative approaches to sleep, stress, and recovery. So welcome, Dr. Zeke Medina. We are very excited to have you.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Courtney.
Yeah. So we're going to jump in on the topic of sleep and sleep during menopause. Within my own journey of this, it has been up and down. And I feel like it's kind of been up and down from quite a long time, right? I think with having children and through the course of this womanhood, I think sleep becomes very up and down.
Very evolving, right?
Right. It's something that is consistently changing. Right. If I look back at it and the topic of sleep, from my teens to my 20s and in my 30s and in my 40s and now in my 50s, it's all been different. But luckily, we've got this wonderful podcast on menopause that we're really speaking to. And I think this is where sleep becomes so important. I believe another part of that is when, if you had children and when they're little and boy, you sure grasp onto that sleep when you feel like, boy, you need it because you're not getting much. But now it's almost something as if we're trying to grab onto it again and we're not quite sure why we're not sleeping right. And again, we don't have those outside external buttons per se, or, a chart saying, oh, this isn't why we're sleeping so well. So we've got some pretty cool questions for you to really bring up. And I'm so excited with knowing your background and all the work that you've done in this, like really to kind of tap in on those questions. And boy, are you a wonderful resource for all of this. So very excited.
Me too. I'm excited. I love it that it's, you mentioned you go through the stages as a woman, and I see it with my wife, her mother. And one thing that I love is that, you can sacrifice a little sleep and it doesn't bother you much when you're fresh, you're a parent, you have all that energy. And as you get older and you start to hear the importance of sleep, then you start to internalize it and go, well, I think I need that now because I'm starting to feel these symptoms. And then it becomes a lot of pressure on you. And so I would love to unpack a lot of that stuff today because I think a lot of it can be mental. And obviously there's some physical changes going on too as you get older. So this is going to be fun. I'm excited.
Yeah. So women report changes in their sleep, during peri to post-menopause. Can you walk us through the shifts that occur and how they directly affect our ability to fall asleep and stay asleep?
I think we kind of need to start with the hormonal cycle, right? Because for men, it's pretty boring, right? Which is kind of what you want in healthcare. You want to have boring results, right? But for women, you have this symphony of hormones dancing throughout the month until your period hits, and then it starts all over. Unless you get pregnant, then something else happens, right? So as you start your cycle, you typically have 1 to 5 or 7 days of, menstruation, right? And then from there, you have your follicular phase, which is your estrogen boosting up. And a lot of times if estrogen is too strong, right? You might notice that, okay, there's too much excitatory symptoms that I'm feeling. You know, you might have better adrenaline, you might be able to exercise better, you might be better in sports, right? And then once you go through ovulation, you enter that luteal phase, you'll find that progesterone is your predominant hormone. And that's your more relaxing, more calm hormone. Now that you kind of have like this fluctuation of estrogen one time, progesterone in the other, what you typically will find is that when you are going through perimenopause or menopause itself, those concentrations start to drop, right? So with estrogen, you might not have as much estrogen as you normally would. Now, estrogen is important because it communicates to the hypothalamus that we need to regulate our temperature, right? And when that doesn't occur, what ends up happening? We might feel things like hot flashes or vasomotor symptoms, which can also cause us to wake up at night. This can happen in perimenopause. One thing that we don't really think too much about is what is actually stressing us or making us more anxious. And if you're a mother with multiple kids, you will feel anxious and stressed and overworked and have so many things to do. And one thing that we don't understand and we need to start understanding more is what is triggering our stress response. In science, they call it an HPA axis. It's releasing cortisol, norepinephrine, epinephrine. It's dilating it's constricting our blood vessels. It's allowing us to have a more higher form of stress in our body, right? And one thing that we need to understand is that when cortisol is constantly being produced, your sex hormones don't take priority anymore. So if you're always anxious and now you're starting to feel the lag of energy in the first part of your cycle and you're feeling more alert the second part, this could be telling another story of stress and cortisol and so many other things. So we talk about our hormones, we talk about thermoregulation, right? The ability for our body to not be able to maintain temperature. And then you have just your regular circadian rhythm changes. You know, our behaviors might change, which don't align with things that support our circadian rhythm anymore. We might try to go to bed early, we might eat late, we might stop exercising. And of course, when it comes to estrogen and progesterone, our mood, right? Hormonal fluctuation really can trigger things like anxiety and depression on the far end, which both can fuel insomnia. But typically, you'll start to see a little bit of irritability and some other things, and that can also come with just a lack of sleep. So it's just like a never-ending cycle.
Yeah. So as we were just as talking about night sweats, and I think the listeners on here know that I've mentioned it quite a bit. That that's one of my main hurdles that I've had throughout
Hmm.
this process. And how is it that we take those and I want to keep going with what you're saying here in the night sweats and possibly the hot
Yeah.
flashes and such as we're regulating this and the stress and the anxiety. How does this play into falling asleep and staying asleep? What are some of the triggers that we can really or not triggers, but what are some of the options that we can go through to trying to lower that pre-sleep?
Yeah, I'm think, a lot of times, right, let's just understand what is going on in our body, right? So estrogen, one of the main hormones that we have in our body, has so many jobs in our body. I mean, if you look at the jobs of estrogen, it's brain and nervous system, your cardiovascular system, your metabolic, and just your general health, bone health, all those things, right? But one of its jobs is to interact with the hypothalamus, which regulates our temperature. And therefore, when you are suffering from low estrogen, right, you don't have that communication anymore. And therefore, that regulation of your body temperature sometimes gets knocked off. Sometimes your body thinks, okay, this normal temperature is too hot. And it starts to dilate because it needs to cool down, which leads to sometimes rapid heart rate because we're trying to pump blood through the periphery. Sometimes it leads to a lot of those hot flashes, sweats, and when your body overheats, because one thing about your body when it's sleeping is that it needs to be cool, it needs to be calm, feel safe. And when you start to overheat, now something's wrong. We wake up. And oftentimes we can wake up in such a mode where we feel stressed And anytime cortisol just increased just a little bit at night, well, our circadian rhythm is not used to that, and you are more sensitive to cortisol. So you might be awake 30 minutes, hour, maybe even two, you know? So that's what's going on in our body. So when we think about, okay, how do we prevent this? How do we, really look at this? Now, at the root, there's things like bioidentical hormones, right? How do we give you just a little bit more estrogen? And it's going to be different for everyone. Everyone tells me, okay, well, Dr. Zeke, how much do I need? I go, well, that's going to be based on what your body is doing. Because one thing about estrogen is that you can give estrogen, but if your body's not breaking it down, metabolizing it, and getting it out of the body, then you're building up estrogen. If your bowels aren't functioning where you're having regular bowel movements, estrogen's getting reabsorbed. And now we have an estrogen dominance, which has its slew of side effects, right? When estrogen and progesterone are not balanced appropriately, we don't want that either. It's a fine balance. So that's why I always tell my clients, we have to go to a doctor that works in these types of hormones that can test and also test the other aspects of your health. Oftentimes, it's a little bit more expensive, but you get the right answers and you find the balance faster so you can eliminate these. There are prescription options as well. So a lot of SSRIs, which are typically known as antidepressants, a lot of clients will say, well, this is why I come to you. I don't want that as my first option. I want something more holistic, something that sings to my body and not fights it or gives my body more to work with. And then as we work together, we're looking at those lifestyle changes. How are you dressing? What kind of fabric are you wearing? A lot of people love polyester because it's nice, silky and smooth, but it's also synthetic that holds in heat. So when you're trying to breathe at night, you're going to really trap that heat and start sweating even more. So we do look for fabrics like cotton, linen, bamboo, not just on our skin, but obviously on our sheets and things like that. We're looking at the mattresses. Is it memory foam? Because those trap in heat as well. Should we get a wool cover so we can get more breathability? And then there's all those fancy gadgets out there where you can have a fan blowing underneath your blanket. You have the gel mattress that cools on the bottom. And those are great if you can afford them. But really, it's just dressing in layers, keeping your bedroom nice and cool, right? Not too cold. We don't want to be shivering. That's not good for us. But just something nice and cool. And then, of course, how can you calm yourself, right? How can you get back into a relaxed mode when you do have a wake up? Because it's going to happen. If you're not targeting that root cause, you're still going to wake up. So is there some kind of breath work? Is there some kind of audio where you can do some kind of, non-deep sleep rest, something that's just, really relaxing that can just put you back in that safe zone so you can allow your body to fall asleep again.
Let's talk about the breath work. I know that I've used one over the course of the years when I would wake up in the middle of the
Uh-huh.
night, and that worked very well. I also recently, and oddly enough, tried it this morning, some ocular
hmm
movements throughout. What are some that you recommend?
I'm real simple on this. So if I'm alone in the bed, I love humming. Okay. Now, one thing we have to understand is your body kind of operates in a sympathetic, which is your fight or flight. So this is when you really want something to get you into gear to play a sport, fight, run, do whatever. And then you have parasympathetic. This is your rest and your digestion kind of part of your nervous system. And when I look at parasympathetic nervous system, I'm thinking of the vagal nerve. The vagus nerve goes right back by the brainstem, goes by the jaw, goes through your vocal cords. Once it hits your sternum, it branches out to almost every organ, right? The reason why this is important is we can do things to stimulate the movement of this vagus nerve so we can send safety, signals to our brain that there is no harm. Okay. So when I'm breathing, I try to remember, try to make your exhales longer than your inhales. So that can mean breathe in for 4 seconds, exhale for 8 seconds. As you're exhaling, if you want to hum and vibrate that vagal nerve, so we can send more messages. I find that triggers a lot of relaxation. If your partner's in bed beside you and you can't hum, then Dr. Andrew Weil has a really great 4-7-8 breathing technique. I use it for everything. It's just that deep relaxation. And while you're just kind of thinking of the numbers as you're breathing in for 4 seconds, holding it for 7 seconds, and then exhaling for 8 seconds, I try to exhale. And this is important. I try to exhale as if I'm fogging up a mirror, so I'll have my hand up there and that just gives me that like I'm relieving something, right? I'm trying to release something.
Mhm.
And I continue that. And eventually my body does get back into a parasympathetic mode because I feel it with a yawn. I feel it with a slow blink, or I just start rubbing my eyes again. And then now I'm looking for that comfortable spot, right? Wake ups are going to be normal. They're normal all throughout stages of life, but it's what you do in that wake up time that makes all the difference. If you want to frustrate and think about why I should be sleeping, well, now we're starting to associate that beautiful place that we call bedroom and putting it as a think tank. And your brain will constantly create that association. And so, a lot of my clients, if they don't fall asleep, we do recommend going to a quiet place outside of the bedroom and doing something very mundane, to try to get that association back. So, when you are feeling tired and sleepy, you go right back to it. And those types of wake ups, totally normal, and it's very temporary. So don't think I'm gonna have to do this my whole life. Once your brain understands this bedroom is for yawning, relaxation, and just being calm, not thinking down the rabbit hole. We cannot allow our brains to do that. And it will if you allow it to.
Sure. And when we chatted before, a couple of those things I do, and I learned to switch.
Hmm.
So in the morning, if I woke up earlier than I had planned on it, and the reason why I probably woke up was some sort of stress or elicited this kind of abrupt wake
Right.
up, right? And then I think that abrupt wake up doesn't really lead to a mindset of gratitude, right? It kind of like, oh, you just wake up, and therefore that rabbit hole, like you're saying,
Yeah.
starts. And so I personally started to switch because I found myself in that panic for a
Hmm.
while, and then I realized if I would stop that and start listing the things I'm grateful for, right?
Hmm.
Some of these things don't cost anything to fix, but when we learn kind of different things to do, that brings that peace that you were talking about, and that humming, that vagus nerve,
Hmm.
right? That helps. But we had chatted about going to a different room or a couch or something that isn't the bedroom
Yeah.
to do, like, and I did that a couple of weeks ago as well. I had gotten up at like 4, and there was some things on my brain, and I didn't want to keep those thoughts in my bed where we had talked about it being this sleep state. And so I had gone into another room to do some reading, dim light,
Yep.
things like that. But having that separate place to take what wasn't meant for the bed
Hmm.
somewhere else. And it is calming. I've built my space very calming and peaceful. So I know that anywhere I kind of pop to next, that helps. And I know that sometimes there isn't that
Mm-mm.
option, but having just a little space, just a little nook to bring back that peace in the middle of the evening.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And, it's something that, we call it stimulus control, the ability to just stimulate that relaxing, calming environment. And I love the way that you said it, just a nook. You just need a chair with maybe a lamp shining what's ever in your hands, whatever your activity is. Some people just flip through a boring magazine. I had one client, they would shuffle a deck of cards. And I was like, wow, nothing more boring than shuffling a deck of cards. And I had a mom, she was folding laundry. And I go, but she was like, I did all of it. And I was just like wired. I go, okay, the problem there is fold it slow and perfect. Make it boring. Make it because we're trying to deactivate this stimulation. We don't want to encourage more. And I was like, if you can't fold it slow, don't do that. Do something completely different. Our main objective is to slow down the brain, deactivate that stimulation, so your body is starting to understand this dim light, this slowness is for me to feel safe because there's nothing I need to look forward to other than relaxation and feeling, calm. So, so I love the way that you're putting that nook of just safety whenever things don't work out in the bedroom.
So, how does the quality of during these years impact other? I mean, I know we touched on the estrogen and stuff,
Hmm.
but how does it impact other health, like brain functions, especially with like metabolism and
Yep.
cardiovascular health and emotional
Yeah.
well-being?
So I want to call this a double-edged sword, Courtney, because
Hmm.
I'm going to say a lot of things, and a lot of your audience might go, I'm not getting that. Is this going to happen to me? And really fear for their health, which can cause things like health anxiety. And I don't want that. What I want you to do is just kind of understand it, but not give sleep so much control over your ability to just still live life, right? Because we know there's a lot of advantages, and sometimes when we hear these podcasts and they're talking about all these great things and you should be sleeping, well, some people can, right? But when you start to try to control sleep, what ends up happening is it gets away from you even further. So what I'm going to talk about are some things that is in literature. We've all seen it. And so there's really a couple of things, like you said, there's brain health, metabolism, cardiovascular, your emotional health, and just in general, resilience. So when you are sleeping, typical 7 to 9 hours, you're getting good quality, and your sleep regularity is on point. That's the time you wake up and the time you go to bed. Brain health, right? We know sleep as a anti-longevity drug for your brain because it reduces Alzheimer's. It clears out beta amyloids. These are plaques that build up, and you have a glymphatic draining system in your brain. So when you're in deep sleep, you're flushing out toxins and proteins that are harmful for your brain. So I love this as sleep because typically in the first 4 hours of sleep, you get the more deep cycles, right? So you're getting that. That's why bedtime is so important. And I always, talk to my clients, it's not the most important, but it is one of the most important anchors to trigger that deep sleep on a regular basis. The next thing is metabolism. We know sleep is so important because if you're not sleeping well, then you have an increase in cortisol, which stimulates appetite. Your leptin levels, which make you feel full, that's a hormone that drops, and you might feel more hungry. There's ghrelin levels that are ramped up. Ghrelin makes you hungry, makes you want to eat more. And then we also know insulin. The sensitivity takes a shot. You become more resistant. And when insulin is more resistant, you're pumping out more insulin. And insulin is a fat storing hormone. So you're going to find and notice more storage of fat cells. And that in general can produce more E1 or estrogen, after menopause, which has its own things to watch out for. Now, we look at cardiovascular, we know lack of sleep increases your blood pressure, increases your heart rate. So when we are sleeping well, not only is our blood pressure a lot better, but we're also getting growth hormone, stimulated, which also replenishes the cardiovascular lining in our arteries to keep those healthier, to fight off the plaque and things like that. And then you have your emotional health. It regulates mood, which can sometimes, you know, just kind of have a never ending cycle of insomnia that triggers anxiety and irritability, and that triggers more insomnia. So we kind of help balance out the mood aspect. And then we know it for resilience, right? Anytime we can maintain our hormones properly, thyroid being another one, we can really find that we can have better life, better quality physically and mentally. So it does, a lot, but I don't want to be your main focus if you're not getting sleep, because that's going to hinder your ability to relax and stay calm at night.
So one of the things that I have found out, and it's become very apparent in the past maybe like 2 years, is that I thrive in routine.
Hmm.
Like really thrive in routine. Um, but what are some tips for women who are stuck in a pattern of poor sleep? What are some strategies or tips that you can have to reset their sleep cycle or reclaim restorative sleep?
I love how you followed that into your body thrives in a sleep pattern because that's important. A lot of people have, I don't know, somewhere along, high school and college, they've kind of picked up like your body needs spontaneity and you need to do this and do that. And I'm like, for some things, but not everything. And they seem to think that's what it is with sleep. But our body has what we call circadian rhythm, and they have also looked at research. There's a very powerful research, a clinical study in 2023, so it was very much released. And they saw the difference between sleep regularity, which is getting your body on a pattern, right, on a schedule, versus sleep duration, how many hours you get of sleep per night. And they saw the more powerful predictor of any type of mortality risk was sleep regularity as the more powerful thing to do over getting a certain amount of duration, amount of hours. And the great thing about that was that it kind of, cemented what we've been teaching our clients, which is anchoring that circadian rhythm, trying to avoid those things like social jet lag. When you have a work schedule, then on the weekends, you want to go out with your friends, stay out 4, 6, 8 hours, and notice, like, okay, my body is suffering Monday morning, and we're going, for good reason. You just threw yourself into
Right, right.
jet lag, right? So, just like you said, a pattern, a schedule, a calendar, whatever you need during the day to keep you on track is important. And one thing that we don't really think about is what is our daytime anchors, right? What are we triggering to our brain that it is morning time? And my hormones for the morning, which is cortisol, you have a cortisol awakening response that shoots up and then it just kind of tapers off. Is that being optimally focused on? And how do we do that? So our daytime anchors, are we getting morning sun first thing in the morning within 30 minutes? At least 15 minutes. If it's cloudy, 15 minutes. If it's not cloudy, less than 10 minutes. But I started walking my kids to school every morning because I need that anchor. And then I'm also getting movement. When your muscles are able to trigger to your circadian rhythm into your brain saying, hey, we're moving, we're awake, let's get that cortisol going and other hormones to keep us going, you find that that lack of sleep the day of is not so bad when you have those morning hormones operating. So we seem to be working in a very dimly lit society now. If you are working indoors inside your home, even in a bright lab, the most lux of light you are getting is about 1,000 lux of light. Okay, your body, if you were in a, let's say it was like a forecast, it was kind of shady outside, you're getting at least 10,000 lux of light. So it's a big shift, big difference. So you want to be going outside, getting that trigger that, hey, body, it's time to wake up, circadian rhythm. We're aligning ourselves on this wake up time, most important. The next thing, are we calming down in the evening time? Are we going 100%? And then hoping that our bodies crash because we just don't have enough time to do everything, right? Many of us, we over volunteer, okay? And I think we need to live more in a life to where if you're not saying heck yes to something, you probably shouldn't do it. Even if they are a good friend or a family member, we should probably just save our sanity because we do need pockets throughout the day to help decompress, help relax, help just get back. And I don't mean scrolling endlessly, thinking that's a break. Just sit there with your thoughts and think about things. Go for a walk. Work things out so you don't have to work them out the night, hour before bedtime when everything comes because guess what? There's no distractions at bedtime. It's just you and your brain and it wants to run. And you should have done that the day or a couple hours before with a walk, right? So Find a good evening calm down. I love taking a warm shower or a warm bath because that will then start to cool my body down, get me right there into that mode. And you can do a mundane activity. You can gratitude journal, right? You can get into that positive mindset, which has been shown to be really helpful for individuals with insomnia. Or you can start practicing those deep breathing techniques. A lot of my clients, they just buy CDs from Amazon. They have old school CD player. I know a lot of people know what those are. And that way they don't have to look at their phones, right? Because we all know when we pop open our phone and we see that red dot on Facebook, what do you want to do? You got to fight not to push it,
Right.
right? So CD player,
Right.
pop it in, hit track 3. I know that's my favorite one, and just relax, right? So we need something to calm us down in the evening, get us into that relaxed mode so we can remember that if we do have wake ups, okay? So we can get back into that mode of, okay, I am safe. There's nothing in my house that I need to be worried about. And then from there, how can we manage certain behaviors during the day? One thing that we're going to notice when estrogen takes a dip, you might not want to be exercising as much. You might not want to go out for walks as much. You also might notice, okay, well, I'm eating more. And a lot of times we start breakfast kind of the wrong way. Our bodies are more sensitive to carbohydrates, so we can metabolize them better. But you are also, shooting yourself in the foot because if you start out with something real sweet or just straight caffeine like coffee without putting protein, complex carbs, or healthy fats, you are going to have these roller coaster of blood sugar. So when your blood sugar goes up, insulin releases, it comes down, and then you're hungry again for something sweet, something salty. So you're constantly playing this ping pong game with your blood sugar, and at night, when you finish it off in dessert with or a soda or something because you just needed it all day, it's going to drop and you're going to wake up, and it's not going to be because of hot flashes. It's going to be because of your blood sugar. And we do become more insulin resistant as we get older, just in general. So we have to think about, okay, how do I stabilize my blood sugar and give my body what it needs, which is typically more and better nutrition, because we do need to really pack that liver with good nutrition so it can do its job. And then, of course, I think we also are pretty bad about if we have a bad night's sleep. What's that one stimulant we reach out for? It's that liquid. What's it? The coffee. We just love
I've
just
heard of it. I've heard of
just.
it.
Oh my gosh, man! It's we have we probably start really good. A lot of us, 1 cup, 2 cups. But then if you see a pot made, all you got to do is pour it, add your sugar, your cream, and it's almost like a chocolate shake after a while, right? It becomes like that addiction because sugar does that to us, or any type of just taste. I mean, we are creatures of habits. Like anything that tastes good, it's hard for me to say no. So I don't keep it in the house. So we start to drink more caffeine, and that night, some of us might have a glass of wine, maybe two, maybe something harder, something more sedated. And I'll be honest, alcohol is a good sedative. It is going to knock you out. But when you start to look at your sleep architecture, the way you go to stage 1, 2, 3, 4, you look at brain waves and how they should be operating, and they're sedated. The architecture's messed up. You're stuck in light stages of sleep instead of deep sleep and REM. So be careful with alcohol. But that seems to be a habit that a lot of clients end up doing because, oh, my girlfriend said it. And I was like, they might have said it as a joke, and maybe it doesn't bother them as much, but they find that it's overworking their liver. It's causing the opposite effect. And a lot of us, we're in that mode of is more better? And it really isn't sometimes. So you just have to be careful with things like that.
So we've got a lot here to work with, right? We've talked about breath work. We've talked about, creating that safe space, that calming space, like getting rid of your phone for a while. We've talked about dimming the lights. We've talked about humming. What is something, just one thing, that somebody could start this evening implementing to help with better sleep. And even though we talked about all this, it takes a little bit for these things to kick in. A routine,
Hmm.
again,
Yeah.
back to, I think that's why I decided that I thrive in the routine, because now I'm set in the
Yeah.
routine, right? And like when I'm off my routine, then I feel those things. And maybe it's those bumper lines that
Yeah.
I have on, or bumper lanes that I have on, but those bumper lanes work for me,
Hmm.
right? Like I figured out that they do work for me. What's one thing that somebody could start this evening, and knowing that it's going to take a little bit, what can we do to just start?
Yeah. Just like landing a plane, you do need a runway. You do need to decelerate and come down. We're not in the Army. We're not a C-130, and we can't just take a dive and land, right? So the one thing that I always implement in every sleep plan in the first week, and we have to be consistent, is that wind down routine, right? We have to be able to deactivate our nervous system so we can land that plane nice and gentle and drift off into what we need to be in, relaxation and sleep. Now, a lot of us have heard this and they go, well, I've done that. Well, think about it this way, because our nervous system and our brain, it's so hard for us to create a habit that is healthy, or a habit that we may not want to do, right? And the harder the habit is, the harder you're going to have to do it. So you have to surround these habits with something that's effortless, something that you do want to do. And just by hearing the education around this can be enough motivation. But motivation is willpower. Willpower is a muscle, and muscle gets fatigued. So you need to find a way, how do I get consistent and be persistent on these habits? Because I really want to be able to allow that body to drift. Because if we can start relaxing, we can start staying more calm and feeling the safety in your home. Now we are looking at a way to really drift into sleep, to get that deep sleep right in the beginning of your sleep cycles, right? So anything that you can do to take your mind off of everything. I usually have my phone, it's already shut off hour before bedtime. There's no distractions. Work emails 2 hours before bedtime, because work is something that endlessly stimulates you. But if you have group chats and other chats and friend chats, take those away, right? They don't belong in that 1 hour wind down. And you don't need a 1 hour. Most of us probably just need 30 minutes, but you want to be able to just find that calm, find that relaxation. And notice how I'm not saying find sleep, okay? That's probably the one of the things that are so backwards, is that you need to force, or you need to find sleep in this environment. When you are relaxed, when you feel safe, sleep will just come, and you just let it, right? So really, we just need to find, what is that one thing? Find your wind down. Find what works for you. And for a lot of my clients, warming up their body initially and then coming out in the cold and letting their body cool down in a warm shower or warm bath, great. You want to do a warm bath, Epsom salt, get that magnesium in your body. Take your supplements for nighttime at that point. So if you're taking magnesium glycinate or any other glycine, taurine, or whatever you want to take, that's a good time to really use those. And then from there, what do you want to calm down with? Do you want a mindset of gratitude when you go to bed? Do you want to get things out of your mind so you don't have to worry about it until the next day? And then do we want to relax with breath work or something else, right? I typically will avoid TV at all costs. Avoid TV in the bedroom. I avoid it anywhere else. But, some people have been shown, with blue light blocking glasses and everything, that they can watch something light, just to kind of occupy their thoughts and just kind of focus on something else. But that's not everybody. So I'd be cautious on those.
All right. So, 3 quick hits to leave our listeners with,
Hmm.
to take away from our conversation today. What would you give them?
So let's talk about hormones, right? We can't avoid them. Um, you might need more detailed lab work. Okay. One thing that's kind of in that weakened state is that you'll get a blood test a lot of times to show how much estrogen and progesterone you get. And they might take it at the right time. Typically, it's within that 10 to 14 day cycle so they can see how progesterone's mapping up. But all you get is a total estrogen, total progesterone, right? And sometimes they can split it up. Um, there's different lab tests that you can take to identify what estrogen you are producing mostly of. What are those metabolites? So the doctor understands, oh, we need to give you these types of supplements so you can start getting those out. They also need to check your gut, because if you're not pooping correctly or, as many times as you should, or if it doesn't look like normal stool, you might be reabsorbing too much estrogen and having that imbalance in your hormones. So really just getting a detailed look. If you're looking at hot flashes and so many mood destability and all these other things, you might want to check those hormones because that can really be the easiest way and the less stressful way in having to go through that whole drag of getting new behaviors because now menopause has really hit you, and then you start to have even worse perpetuating factors affecting your sleep that cause long-term insomnia. So hormones, if you think that's it, I would say there's so many websites that can find a functional medicine doctor. Your doctors are becoming more educated on these types of tests. So you can ask them, what can break down more of these? And then I like to start, because I'm a pharmacist, right? Which pharmacies are accredited when it comes to compounding? These pharmacists work with doctors just in general when it comes to hormones. And the accreditation that they look for is called PCAB, PCAB, or ACH as in Henry, C. Those two type of accreditations, these are pharmacies that look for safety, quality, efficacy, all of that when they compound. And they send these off for third-party testing to make sure their formulations are exactly that. They're also pure, so there's nothing that's going to cause you to be sick. You're not going to be getting estrogen and a little bit of progesterone, testosterone. If the prescription says estrogen, it is estrogen at that concentration, with sometimes 3% difference, which is unheard of. I think FDA gives manufacturers 10% difference when they make pills and tablets. So those type of compounding pharmacies do the things right, and you're going to be getting a high quality product. And they oftentimes will work with doctors that do hormones and other testing to kind of help identify certain imbalances that could be affecting your hormones. The other thing, find a schedule that works for you. Courtney said it best. Her body thrives, my body thrives, my children's, their bodies thrive on that schedule. And if you don't feel like that's helping you with sleep, just understand sleep regularity, going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, has a better ability to fight off mortality and diseases than just getting the right amount of hours. So don't focus on getting 8, 9, 10, or being asleep all throughout the night and then having that wake up and then just being frustrated. Just worry about being consistent in your habits, because that overall is going to allow you to really, have that longevity for the long run. And then if there's anything I can say is, don't take life serious, at times. We get to the mode of, since we wake up and then we go to bed, we are so active, and our breaks are us scrolling on our phone or, going on TV or, doing things that are still stimulating, multitasking, trying to listen to a podcast, but doing all these things instead of relaxing. When your body is multitasking, you're still amping up your stress hormone. So focusing on one thing, crocheting, knitting, doing something that's keeping your mind in there and staying social and enjoying life. Like, these are things that allow us to relax and shut off that stress response, which helps us because we have parts in our brain. If it's always stimulated, then any type of stress is going to really put us in overdrive again. So finding those times to just take breaks, and don't feel like you have to be doing something every single day. Even if you are a stay-at-home parent, Like, you don't have to be doing something every day. It is okay to rest every hour or 2 hours and then get back to it. Especially in the workplace, finding those breaks. If they give you 15 minutes to do something, go for a walk. Don't stay there trying to, do more stuff to catch up. I mean, that there's a reason why we have breaks and vacation, and that's so we can reset, relax, and come back recharged. Otherwise, we're just burning the candle at both ends.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate this conversation. And, I just adore you and I appreciate you being here. And our listeners, I think, are going to take away so many different things. And it's just fantastic. So we really, really want to thank you for your time today.
I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Take care.
Please listen in as we release new Menopause the Positive Way episodes the first Wednesday of every month. And until then, here's to your continued health. We are so glad you joined us for this episode of Menopause the Positive Way, and hope you will share this podcast with friends and family. You can subscribe to the series wherever you get your podcasts. Along with this podcast, Positive Health also offers a holistic, one-stop digital health experience supporting your body, mind, and spirit during the menopause journey. If you or anyone you know is looking for guidance, education, and services that address the many symptoms and needs experienced during your menopause journey, you can become a member of our pilot program. And you can join by visiting our positivehealth.com website. That's PAUSITIVE health.com, making life easier and helping you make a change for the better.
This is an educational podcast where the views of our guests do not necessarily reflect the views of Positive Health. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Positive Health does not provide medical advice.